The mental load of motherhood. Why you're exhausted by work nobody sees. A parenting guide from Creative Minds Montessori. You're not disorganized or too type A. You're carrying cognitive labor, the never-off work of anticipating, planning, deciding and monitoring everything a family needs. In a survey of about 3,000 parents, mothers managed roughly 71% of the household mental load, and about 79% of the daily repetitive responsibilities, even in homes both partners called equal. The fix isn't a better to-do list, and it isn't just tell me what you need, because that keeps you the manager. What works? Hand over whole domains end-to-end, get the invisible list onto a shared surface, recruit your kids into real jobs, and use a communicative childcare team as a genuine second set of eyes. A mother at work realized they were out of milk, wipes, and the one specific cracker her toddler will eat. She coordinated a pickup while finishing a report, holding 100% of the household's memory in a browser tab. A father realized on Sunday night that a permission slip had been buried in a backpack for a week, and spent the evening hunting for a printer that worked. The deeper point wasn't the form, it was that nobody had been tracking the backpack. And one mother came home wrung out from a day of scheduling, organizing, and remembering, and was asked what she'd actually done. Because none of the day's real work left a visible trace. A mother of 4 listed hers out loud: the family social calendar, her kids' friends' names and their friends' parents' names, medical appointments and which vaccines are due, seasonal wardrobe swaps and hand-me-downs to donate, meals and snacks, emails to teachers, school projects, what the kids are seeing online, and the master calendar so nothing double books. Her phrase for all of it was the intricacies that keep everyone comfortable and organized. After nearly 12 years, the breaking point looked like screaming into a pillow. And dozens of parents replied that she'd just described their own inner life. Here's the single most clarifying idea in this topic. What you're carrying isn't chores, it's a distinct fourth dimension of household work. Sociologist Alison Daminger's research names its 4 moves precisely: anticipating a need, identifying the options, deciding, and monitoring the result. Washing the dishes is execution. The load is everything wrapped around it, noticing the dishwasher tablets are almost gone, knowing which brand doesn't leave film, deciding whether it's worth a separate trip, and then checking whether anyone actually ran it. And the research found something more specific than women do more. Women disproportionately carry anticipation and monitoring, precisely the 2 parts that can't be scheduled and can't be switched off. It's horizon scanning. Are we about to run out? Is this about to become a problem? Did that thing get handled? Which is why the tiredness doesn't match the visible workload, and why it drains attention from paid work, rest and hobbies even in moments when nobody's doing a task at all. A parent standing at a supermarket checkout, mid-transaction, suddenly remembering an unanswered teacher email is not being scatterbrained. She's running a background process that has no off switch. It's worth separating 2 things that get blended. Mental load is the perpetual logistics list: menus, sizes, uniforms washed at 11 p.m., appointments, forms. Emotional labor is being the household's thermostat, noticing who's stressed, remembering a child's rough week, keeping the peace. Mental load is the project manager hat, emotional labor is the caretaker one. In parenting they arrive together, which is why the 2 compound rather than merely coexist. Then the question of why it lands unevenly, and Daminger's finding here is the uncomfortable one. Couples routinely explain the imbalance away as personality. She's type A, he's laid back. Rather than recognizing a structural pull neither of them chose. That explanation is what keeps it in place, because a personality difference sounds like nobody's fault and nothing to renegotiate. And the cost is physiological, not dramatic. Sustained cognitive demand strains executive function, and chronic overload produces a kind of low-level survival mode: anxious, snappy, touched out, decision-fatigued, emotionally flat, losing interest in the very relationships the work was supposed to serve. That's an inevitable response to unsustainable expectations, not a personal failing. Parents have always carried this. It just used to be folded invisibly into keeping house and being a good mother, with no vocabulary attached, which meant it couldn't be discussed, only felt. The naming happened in 1989, when sociologist Arlie Hochschild published The Second Shift, drawing on interviews with 50 couples and in-home observation across the 70s and 80s. Her finding, after women entered paid work en masse, they came home to a second shift of housework and childcare, and the couples reported guilt, marital tension, and sleep deprivation as a direct result. Her larger argument was that this was a stalled revolution. Women's move into the workforce was not matched by men, workplaces, or policy picking up home labor. Much of it stays invisible because it looks like love. But it's labor that benefits everyone. Nearly 4 decades later, the gap has narrowed without closing. In 2022 and 23, married U.S. women still did about 1.6 times the housework and 1.8 times the childcare of men. Notice which gap closed faster. The physical chore gap shrank more than the cognitive one. Men picked up more dishes than anticipating. And modern life added entirely new monitoring categories that didn't exist for our parents: watching a child's online life and the trends moving through it, managing the family's digital calendar plus the flood of school app notifications, group chats, sign-up links, and screenshots of flyers that someone has to transcribe into an actual plan. The anticipatory list got longer and more fragmented, and a phone in your pocket means the school, the office, and the group chat never close either. Where technology genuinely helps, a shared family calendar creates real transparency, cuts missed appointments, and moves who remembers out of one person's head onto a surface everyone can see. Some apps let both parents comment on an event, which kills a surprising amount of what time is pickup churn. The honest catch is that tech relocates the load rather than deleting it. Someone becomes the calendar secretary, retyping flyers and forwarding screenshots. Entry friction during busy weeks means stale data exactly when you need it most. And a schedule living behind one adult's lock screen is invisible to a child who can't read it. 3 common fixes, honestly. The first, just ask me, tell me what you need. Things genuinely get done and the offer is usually sincere. But it keeps the manager as the manager. The load isn't in the doing, it's in the anticipating, assigning, and verifying. Having to notice, decide, instruct, and then check whether it happened is itself 3 more tasks, and delegating is cognitive work too. It outsources the hands and keeps the brain. And there's a backfire loop underneath. When the manager monitors, corrects, or quietly redoes the job, the other partner's brain learns that initiative gets criticized, so they wait to be told, and the manager's load grows. Therapists describe the resulting pattern as pursuer and withdrawer. One organizes to manage anxiety, the other retreats to avoid criticism. Neither person intends any of it, and both are stuck. The second, systems and apps. Genuine transparency and fewer missed appointments, but setup and maintenance are labor, and they tend to land on the same person. The load moved house but kept its owner. Worth doing only if upkeep is explicitly assigned rather than assumed. The third, full domain ownership. Instead of splitting tasks, one partner takes a whole domain end to end. Groceries means the noticing, the list, the timing, and the shopping. It kills both the double up and the dropped ball, and one couple 6 months in reported that fully assigning groceries and laundry ended their wet laundry redo cycle, and, tellingly, ended the guilt. Dishes is your card, so I don't feel bad walking past them. The catch: the system overhead can feel like more admin than it's worth. It adapts awkwardly to blended and same-sex and multi-generational families, and setting it up can dump a large planning project on one partner at the start. Tendencies, not rules. The default split in heterosexual couples: mothers manage roughly 71% of household mental load tasks versus about 29% for fathers. But the more revealing number is the texture. Mothers handle around 79% of the daily repetitive responsibilities, childcare and cleaning, while fathers cluster in the occasional and episodic, finances, home repairs, the annual and the one-off. So it isn't only that one person does more. It's that one person does the relentless and the other does the periodic, and relentless is what erodes you. Then the perception gap that turns this into a fight. Fathers frequently overestimate their share, so two people can each genuinely feel they're doing a lot and disagree wildly. In fairness, fathers carry cognitive load too: finances, maintenance, longer horizon planning, and naming that isn't a betrayal of the point. Both are true. But the most hopeful comparison comes from same-gender couples, who consistently divide labor more equally, and how they do it is the transferable part. In an interview study, cognitive labor shifted between partners according to circumstance rather than sitting in a fixed 50-50 split, allocated by what felt fair and just given each person's current work, study and health. Some hadn't even noticed a partner's invisible work until an interviewer asked. The lesson generalizes to every family shape: the win isn't a perfect split. It's explicit, renegotiable, gender role-free allocation, revisited often. Fair, not equal. Single parents can't split it at all. It's structurally 100% on one person, which changes the goal entirely. For single parents, the move isn't rebalancing with a partner, it's shedding and importing. Simplifying what's on the list at all, and bringing in outside structure, childcare, family, a shared calendar with a co-parent across households. And when you do raise this with a partner, the script matters more than the evidence. Scorecards invite defense. So reframe from blame to connection. Not "you never think ahead," but "when I have to hold all these details alone, I feel lonely and disconnected from you." That sentence is about the two of you, which is the only frame in which anything gets renegotiated. Here's the through line of all three methods. Stop dividing tasks and start transferring ownership. To your partner, to a shared surface, and to your children. The first method: hand over whole domains, not tasks. If you split a task, both people stay mentally on the hook, one to remember and assign, one to perform, so the anticipating never leaves your head. Transferring the entire cognitive stack for one domain is the only version that frees a mind. Which is why "I'll do the shopping if you make the list" changes almost nothing, while "you own groceries" changes a great deal. Start with one small domain: pet supplies, meal planning, laundry from hamper to folded. The new owner anticipates, plans and executes without reminders. And define a shared minimum standard of care up front so done isn't ambiguous. Trash means out and a new bag in, laundry means folded and put away. Then comes the part that decides whether this works. The handing over partner must fully step back. No checking, no reminding, no redoing, even if they buy the wrong brand of pasta. Add a 10-minute weekly check-in to redeal domains as life changes. Where a child is involved, say a father now owns the whole bedtime routine, overlap for a few nights so the child sees both parents endorse the new owner, and keep the routine's shape identical at first so only the person changes, not the ritual. Predictability protects the child while the adults rebalance. Expect a genuinely worse month. The new owner will forget things you never forgot, and that's the cost of transfer, not evidence it's failing. The saboteur is the rescue, stepping in the first time the ball drops. One rescue teaches both of you that it was never really handed over. The second method works on two levels at once. For adults, an external surface ends the requirement that one brain hold the family's future. For young children, a predictable visible routine meets a real developmental need for order. Small children are calmer and more confident when they can see what comes next, which is the Montessori principle behind a prepared environment. So, one shared adult calendar that both parents own, with calendar upkeep named as its own domain so it doesn't quietly become one person's second job. Capture recurring items as repeating events, so they're decided once rather than re-remembered every week. That single move retires a surprising number of background processes. Then for the child, build a low-tech visual schedule, picture cards for the morning or bedtime sequence that a toddler can read themselves. Build the chart with them. Let them place the cards, and frame it as autonomy rather than surveillance, so you can be the boss of your morning. Let them move the card or the check mark themselves, because the moving is the part that transfers ownership. Toddlers and preschoolers use pictures, older children move to lists and eventually shared digital calendars. Accept the honest limits, entry friction, secretary creep, and the fact that a phone calendar is invisible to a 4-year-old, which is exactly why the paper chart earns its wall space. The saboteur is running 2 systems in parallel. If the real schedule still lives in your head and on the shared calendar, you've added a task rather than removed one. The third method, recruit your children into real practical life ownership. The Montessori insight is that household work isn't a burden imposed on childhood, it's developmentally valuable in its own right, building independence, coordination, concentration, and genuine responsibility. Small children want to participate, which makes them a resource rather than an obstacle. And every task a child truly owns is simultaneously one item off your monitoring list and one competence win for them. Both sides gain, which is rare. By age, toddlers from about 18 months can wash hands, pull up their own pants, work on buttons and zips, and put laundry in the hamper. Preschoolers can set the table, water plants, fold, sweep, wash dishes, and pack part of their own bag. Older children can plan a meal, manage an allowance, run a small project start to finish. The introduction method matters more than the task list. Model slowly, with movement rather than words. Give real practice time without rushing. Follow the child's interest and readiness rather than a schedule, and celebrate effort over output. Add one task at a time, and let it be genuinely theirs, which means resisting the urge to redo it, since that's the same gatekeeping trap that undoes a partner handover. Expect it to be slower and messier than doing it yourself for weeks. The point is ownership, not efficiency. And there's a quieter payoff. A child who has a real job learns that logistics are shared family work rather than one person's invisible burden, which is the lesson that eventually changes households a generation from now. The saboteur is treating it as a chore chart for compliance. The moment it becomes a behavior system rather than real work, the developmental engine switches off. A good program lifts genuine cognitive load, in ways worth being specific about. Consistency between home and school is the biggest single relief. When the same rhythms exist in both places, the child regulates better and you carry far less re-explaining and re-establishing work in the evenings. Second, the program's predictable daily structure is a ready-made framework you can lean on and even echo at home, so the schedule doesn't have to live entirely in your head. Third, trained observation gives you a second set of eyes. Teachers notice a shifting nap need or an emerging struggle and tell you, offloading part of your monitoring to someone whose actual job it is. Fourth, daily reporting on eating, sleeping and diapering literally removes did she nap and when did she eat from your tracking list. And fifth, a program that builds independence means your child does more for themselves in both settings. A weak program adds load instead. Mismatched approaches mean whiplash for the child and re-regulation work for you. Thin communication, a vague "he had a good day," means your monitoring list grows because you're still guessing about naps and mood. Turnover means re-onboarding a new caregiver every few months, re-explaining triggers from scratch, which is pure added labor. And a center that brushes off a concern makes offloading impossible, because you can't delegate monitoring to someone you don't trust. So run it 3 ways. You give them the triggers, the routine and the exact language you use. They give you daily observation plus anything worth watching, and the child carries a piece of the bridge, moving their own photo at drop-off, or simply hearing that your teacher and I both know the plan. 5 questions worth asking any center. How do you keep routines consistent with home? What will I hear about my child's day, and how? What happens when a parent raises a concern? What's your staff turnover like? And do you help children learn to do things for themselves? No single system fits every family, and the sources agree on this more than they agree on any method. The card-based approach transformed one couple's laundry and left their guilt-free personal time unsolved. Apps deliver real transparency and then quietly reconcentrate the work on whoever maintains them. Same-gender couples succeed not by discovering a superior split but by staying flexible and renegotiating. The tool matters less than making the invisible visible and then revisiting it on purpose. And part of the answer is unglamorous, lowering the bar rather than only redistributing it. If the load is an inevitable response to unsustainable expectations, then some of what needs to change is the expectations. Good enough genuinely beats perfect here, because perfect is a load-generating standard. So know your own child and your family's actual shape, and aim for fair, not equal, and always renegotiable. The perception gaps, the guilt and the type A self-blame are documented, predictable, and not a verdict on you. You are not bad at this. You are doing a job with no visible output, and the invisibility was always the hardest part. For the full guide, and more parenting resources, visit creativemindsmontessori.com/parenting.